It appears Shohei Ohtani is innocent, and we have all the details coming up from all the latest news we got from the Ippei Mizuhara scandal. Let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. From brakes to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. This is a daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. And you can become an everydayer by listening or watching every day, which can be made easier by subscribing and being notified when our episodes are ready for you. If this is your first time listening or watching, welcome. My name is Vince Samperio, joined by my co-host, Jeff Snyder. Jeff and I are both lifelong Dodger fans that have covered the team for a decade now in different capacities. We've been doing this podcast for half of that decade, a general Dodger podcast for longer than that. So we've talked a lot about the Dodgers. We've watched a lot of Dodger games, and we don't get tired of it. So we're here to bring you some smart and rational thoughts about the Dodgers. And I guess smart and rational kind of makes sense as a segue for this one. The Dodgers lost. They won the series against the Twins, but lost the final game. And then it was going to be, one of those episodes where we talk about a loss, and then we got some news that is positive in the Dodgers sense. TMZ Sport, or TMZ in general, TMZ Sports, reported that it appears federal authorities have cleared Shohei Ohtani of any wrongdoing, that he was a victim of fraud, and that Ippei had been embezzling from one of his accounts. There was also an article from the New York Times that expanded a little bit on that said Ippei was going to plead guilty. And some of the other notes from that include that if the money might have been more than $4.5 million, and that Ippei might have been able to change the bank settings so Shohei Ohtani would not be notified when transactions were made in whatever that account he was using was. So that really quickly answers a lot of the questions that the doubters had. But yeah, Jeff, it was, we kind of figured this was the case. We took everything at face value. And it seems like that worked out.
Yeah, our approach all along has been, let's wait for the information to come out and then draw conclusions. And that approach, I believe, is now undefeated in the history of the world. Get information before drawing conclusions. It's still, we call it good news because it is good news for Shohei Ohtani. It's good news for the Dodgers. The whole situation still sucks. I mean, it's still the fact is Shohei Ohtani's best friend stole a bunch of money from him, and that sucks for him, sucks for everybody. But at least it won't be pinned on Shohei Ohtani. And it's kind of interesting. Like I think from day one, anybody with two brain cells knew that Ohtani wasn't actually doing the gambling. Like Ippei wasn't placing the bets for Ohtani. Like it just never passed any sort of believability test that Ippei would take the fall, destroy his own life to save Ohtani's baseball career. He definitely wouldn't go to prison for him. And so, that one was easy to discount. The question all along was which version, because two different stories came out from Ohtani's camp. Which version is true? Did Ohtani knowingly pay Ippei's gambling debts, or did Ippei steal the money? And when you started to factor in all of the different things, like the fact that the Dodgers were in Korea, and so Ippei was like the only lifeline. Like I assume Ohtani's agent was in Los Angeles, where he lives, while the Dodgers were in Korea, and so in the New York Times article, it talks about how the agent Nez Bolello got contacted, and he contacted Ippei to find out what was going on, and Ippei gave him a story, and the fact that they were halfway around the world helps answer a lot of this stuff, like why Ippei was able to manipulate the situation, the conversation about it for as long as he was. And even, his interview with ESPN was done over the phone or whatever, because he was in Korea and they weren't. And so, all of it always made sense that Ohtani could be telling the truth. And, like Sully on Locked On MLB, he made the point several times that Ohtani should have stuck with the first story because it was more believable. And my point all along has been he should stick with the true story. So if the first story wasn't true, then he shouldn't stick with it, regardless of whether Sully or anybody else thinks it's more believable. If it's a lie, it's a lie. And the fact is, the most believable, according to some people, isn't always the truth. And I do think that, maybe not with Sully specifically, but with plenty of people, there was a lot of anti-Dodger bias that was making them think that one were anti-Dodger or anti-Ohtani himself. A lot of people don't like Ohtani anymore since he did the same thing they would do in his situation and took the most money to play baseball. But whatever bias had people thinking that the one that was more damaging to Ohtani was more believable than the one that wasn't.
Well, the fact of the matter is Ohtani only had one story. The Ohtani camp, Ohtani camp, which we found out was just Ippei, realistically, was the issue. Yeah, Ohtani only spoke once, and he said all what he had to say. And, then and New York Times. So the TMZ article basically says that the federal authorities have said, Shohei's kind of cleared of wrongdoing. The New York Times article didn't say that specifically, but did say that Ippei's planning to plead guilty, and that, depending on what he says specifically, that would confirm what Ohtani's story was in the sense of what he gave at his press conference. So, there's still more to come out. Everything, the TMZ article said Ippei should be charged any day now, and the New York Times article said he's going to plead guilty, sometime in the next week. So we'll find more of that out now. But for me, this always made sense after we kind of got more of the facts. Obviously, when breaking news like this happens, you don't get all the facts at once. You kind of get them in pieces, and we got them in pieces, and not necessarily the right pieces in order, but you could kind of piece it together. And once you got to the point where, okay, Ohtani didn't know about any of this, and it's all on Ippei, and for me, it was always a matter of, okay, do I think Ohtani's a degenerate, gambler and liar, or do I think Ippei's a degenerate gambler and liar? And just based on what I know, which is not much about either guy, but I'm going to take Ohtani, who has way more to lose than Ippei at that point, who has more to lose in a smaller sense, probably like in a sense of a ratio compared to what it is, but in the grand scheme of things, Ohtani had everything was on the line for Ohtani.
Especially since one of them had admitted to being a degenerate gambler. Like, okay, we know one of these two is. One says that it's him, and the other one also says that it's that guy. Not that hard to believe that it's the guy who admits it. And Sully and I actually had a heated conversation that either fortunately or unfortunately wasn't recorded, so it won't be showing up anywhere on the Locked On Podcast Network. About this, and Sully kept getting hung up on the two different stories. But to your point, what I asked Sully is, okay, tell me the person who said the first story. He's like, Ohtani's camp. I said, no, name a person. And that's the thing that never sat right with me. It's like, okay, we've heard a crisis manager, we've heard Ohtani's camp, we haven't heard any names. And so if the story from Ohtani's camp, the first story, was just Ippei answering questions and covering his own butt, it doesn't hold any water, And so it just, I was accused by people of having an opinion that only a biased Dodger fan could have, but I guess the FBI is also a biased Dodger fan. So
yeah, there's more for us to talk about on this specific situation. So that's what we're going to do. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by Policygenius. If you need a safety net for your family, but you're trying to find the right policy, it can be time-consuming and overwhelming, but Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. While I'm not currently a parent or a caregiver, one day there may be, or I have enough family close enough to me that life insurance policy could work for me. And I think Policygenius is there to help you out with it because it's convenient and time saving. It easily compares quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. And if your work life insurance policy doesn't offer enough protection for your family's needs, you can get your own. And even still there if you leave your job. So Policygenius gives you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team with thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. So check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonmlb or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonmlb. Today's episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube and become an everydayer by listening or watching every day. Remember that the Locked On Sports Today is a 24/7 sports streaming channel from the Locked On Podcast Network, programmed to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. There's also Locked On Sports Los Angeles, which is the same, but for LA sports. All right, Jeff. So yeah, just kind of going through these Ohtani articles and kind of what's been reported. I guess the one thing that's we hadn't got specifics for is how this all came to be in Korea. And it said, you mentioned a little bit earlier, but it said Ippei had been talking to Nesbolello, which is Ohtani's agent, and had offered different versions of what had happened. Mizuhara had said that Ippei said that he paid the debts of an unnamed team, that Ohtani paid the debts of an unnamed teammate. That's something we haven't seen yet. And then that Ippei had racked up debts with the bookie and Ohtani bailed him out. Once that kind of happened, that's when all this started getting rolling, and the Dodgers and Nesbolello and everybody else got involved, and that's when the Dodgers asked Ippei to address the team after the first game in Korea. The one thing that's mentioned in all this is that in all of this, Shohei Ohtani was still kept in the dark, which if I'm Shohei Ohtani, I might be reevaluating a little bit of what's going on with the management team.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, maybe it's just hindsight, so it's easy to see. But for me, once Ippei had told two different stories, I wouldn't have trusted that he was actually having the conversations with Ohtani for me that he says he is. I probably would have insisted on a FaceTime or a Zoom call or something where they're both there together, and maybe bring in a Japanese speaker to listen in on your side to make, okay, is he really, because at that point, that there's been, and maybe Ippei told Nez, oh, Ohtani actually misspoke. It wasn't actually a teammate, but still, it's like, it wasn't actually a teammate. It was me. Like, at some point you would think that he would be suspicious. And so maybe it was like a sting operation. It's like, okay, well, maybe the best way to get to the bottom of this is to have Ippei address the team in front of Ohtani and put him on the hot seat there. I still, I don't think that's the most likely reason they did it. It seems like they just, at some point, it didn't occur to them soon enough. Maybe Ohtani doesn't know about any of this, because it seemed like they just took Ippei's word that, yeah, Ohtani knows about, he paid my gambling debts.
Yeah. And like I said, it's such a crazy story that it's one of those where you read about people who get, defrauded and things of that nature by like, people with text messages or, phishing scams or the Prince of Nigeria back in the day. And you think like, how do you let that happen? But when you're in the moment, that's something that people have said is like when you're in the moment, you're just so worried about a bunch of different things or not thinking of everything clearly that it's hard to kind of put it all together. But yeah, I mean, like I said, for me, it was always a matter of Ippei versus Shohei, and I was going to take Ippei as the bad guy in general. Now, what this means specifically for Ohtani and everything moving forward, one of the articles, I think the New York Times one did say that Ohtani did speak with federal authorities, had already done that, so the team's article said basically he's cleared of any wrongdoing in terms of the federal authorities. You would imagine that means the same now for MLB once the investigation, I don't know if it'll be done by tomorrow, next week, or when all this kind of finally concludes, but you got to imagine there's literally no repercussions coming for Ohtani.
Yeah, the only thing that Ohtani was being accused of by anybody with a functioning brain was paying off a bookie, which is illegal and could have gotten him in trouble with the law and with Major League Baseball. So if the law is determining that he didn't do that, then Major League Baseball is absolutely going to clear him too. And, the main thing that stood out to me was that this all happened pretty quick. And that's one of the reasons that the government does reward people for pleading guilty. Ippei's probably going to get a reduced sentence for pleading guilty. I guess it's not even unreasonable to think he might get a sentence with no jail time. I don't know. But because I imagine they're going to want him to testify against the bookie and all that stuff. And, but whatever it is, he's going to get reduced sentence for pleading guilty. And the benefit of that is the government didn't have to go through the expense of building a case, and this gets resolved. It's only been 3 weeks. And I know 3 weeks probably feels like forever for Ohtani, who's been having to deal with it. But 3 weeks to get this sort of resolution. And I guess, we haven't gotten anything officially resolved. It's just reports right now, but somewhere within less than a month, we're going to go from the initial reports to Ippei has pleaded guilty, basically, and that's really, really quick. And I think, again, this isn't really a baseball story, but from a baseball standpoint, it's really good news for everybody that it has been resolved so quickly so that it can just become a non-issue to everybody with a functioning brain.
Yeah, it's, like I said, that we haven't got any for sure resolution yet. And it's still a matter of, is all this, we saw that Ippei was going to get charged with fraud, but like, is he pleading guilty to the fraud part? Is he pleading guilty to the legal, bookie part, or or everything combined? Is he going to give up names in order to kind of save himself now in terms, because the whole time everyone, kind of the consensus was they don't care so much about the bookie or the guy making the bets. They care more about the bookie in terms of the illegal gambling ring, but also with fraud and embezzling, or whatever the actual terms end up being, that's going to be different. And there's really kind of no way around that. I don't even think when we heard that Ohtani, they had contacted authorities for a criminal investigation. I don't know if you have, like, do you have to charge Ippei, or is it a matter of now it's all in the Fed's hands? I don't know. But the one question left, and it doesn't affect Ohtani specifically, is if Ippei was betting on baseball, which would be interesting in the sense of, he is in clubhouses, he is in locker rooms, he does have, I would imagine, other people with other teams that are maybe interpreters or some kind of other connections. So that's possible. But again, that has nothing to do with Ohtani specifically, just more of a baseball question.
Yeah. And it's probably mostly academic, because the fact is, if he was, then he might be banned for life from baseball, but no team's ever going to hire him as an interpreter again anyway. I guess the other unresolved question is Ohtani going to get his money back? The fact is he had millions of dollars stolen from him that Ippei doesn't have that money. If Ippei had the money, he wouldn't have stolen it in the first place, and are they seizing? I can't imagine that they're going to return funds to people who placed illegal bets with the bookie But in this case, where the money was stolen, like, do they have a mechanism for seizing that money from the bookie and returning it to Ohtani? I don't know. And even that might just be academic. When we heard more than 4.5 million. We didn't hear an exact number, but even if it was double that, that's like, I mean, I guess that is 4.5 years of Ohtani's salary on his current contract. But so you'd have to wait till 2034 to make that up. But overall, I think Ohtani is going to be fine without that 4.5 or 10 or $20 million, whatever it is. I can't imagine it's as high as 20 million, but even if it's 5 or 6 million, he'll be fine. But I guess that's a more of an interesting question to me. Like, is he going to get that money back?
Yeah. And, as we always kind of talk about on here, I would recommend anybody with the blue check mark on Twitter, don't really ever interact with them if it's something that you disagree with, just because, it's a matter of they're trying to get that out of you. But this is not going to satisfy everyone. This is going to satisfy the people that it matters to, more than likely. If your friends are still calling Ippei a fall guy, just remember that I don't believe Shohei Ohtani is a citizen, so I don't think the federal authorities would be protecting a non-citizen in this case in order to whatever, protect his baseball career.
Yeah, it's just insane and brain dead to think that Ippei is literally going to plead guilty to a federal crime because his buddy asked him to.
Yeah. So, all right, back to the actual baseball field. Like I said, the Dodgers lost. Not the main reason, but one reason is Bobby Miller didn't pitch that well and didn't go deep into the game. That's now 2 starts that have been not great. So we're going to talk about that. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's at $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. I am a FanDuel user when I am in the states that allow FanDuel, and I love it. It's easy to build out parlays. It's easy to put bets down. It's easy to add funds. They're always running different promos and the parlay hub and stuff like that. So go check out FanDuel. There's no reason to wait. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We want to thank you for being an everydayer if you are one. If you're not one, you can become one by listening or watching every single day. And you can go beyond the podcast by going to joinsubtext.com/lockedondodgers and be notified from us about news, our reactions, our thoughts, different questions. You can even provide us with information if it happens. Jeff was the first one to let me know about the Ohtani news today, and our insiders knew just right after that, probably before most people that knew. So make sure to go to joinsubtext.com/lockedondodgers and become a Locked On Dodgers insider. All right, Jeff. So the Dodgers lost 3-2. Bobby Miller started the game, so at the very least he only allowed 3 runs. In actuality, he allowed 2 runs, but he only went 4 innings. That meant the Dodgers bullpen had to cover the rest of the game, which they did a good job of, other than Alex Vesia, who gave up a home run right after Bobby came out in that 5th inning. Now that's back-to-back mediocre games, 1 bad game, 1 mediocre game from Bobby Miller after the lights-out performance he had at home against the Cardinals. Are we concerned about Miller? What are we seeing from Miller? What are we thinking?
Yeah, there's obviously some level of concern. I think the Cubs game is easy enough to just put behind you because the weather was terrible. Pitching in the stadium he grew up going to, all those things. There's a lot going on there. And so if he had pitched really well today, it would have been easy to say, okay, that Chicago game was a blip. It was weather, whatever. And he did pitch better in this game. And he did show some tenacity, grit, what the old WWF announcers would call testicular fortitude. He battled through base runners. He got the big outs when he needed to, all that stuff. But only going 4 innings meant that Alex Vesia had to pitch. I think in the Dave Roberts' perfect world, Miller would have gone 6, and then they would have closed it out with the 3 relievers that he trusts, the 3 guys who pitched in Monday's game, but it wasn't that. And the fact that Vesia gave up the game-winning homer on the second pitch he threw or whatever, it is what it is. But I think that's 3 times I've said that in the last week. I hate that phrase. I'm committing to you all now. I will stop saying it is what it is because I really don't like that phrase. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm super concerned about Bobby Miller, but I'm definitely more concerned than I would be if he was pitching well.
Yeah, it's not a long-term concern, but it is, at least specifically in the game against the Twins yesterday, it was an issue of command. He, did give up 5 hits, 3 walks, but it wasn't necessarily a matter of not having the stuff. The stuff looked good, but he just couldn't put it where he wanted, and he was leaving a lot of balls up in the zone or out of the zone. And if there's a lot of balls out of the zone, it's easy for guys to kind of to lock into the zone and look for stuff there. And if not, then it's easy to get on base via walks, and that's kind of what happened. And realistically, coming off the game he did last time when he only threw 58 pitches, and then coming into this game, I forget exactly how many pitches he was at, but not 100.
73, 76.
Yeah, he could have gone one more inning. I think that Dave Roberts didn't want him to face the top of the order another time, and that was the main reason for taking him out. But it's early in the season. But for me, Bobby Miller, a struggling Bobby Miller, I'd rather see him out there than Alex Vesia. I know why. I can justify either side of that argument of why you take him out there and why you don't. But again, as we've talked about before, Dave Roberts might not always be thinking of just the win every single time. If Bobby goes out there and does struggle again against the top of the order, then, that's a little bit more deflating for a guy, especially a guy that, like I said, the stuff was there. It just wasn't commanded well.
Yeah, and that top of the order had a lot of success against him in this game. I wonder if the leadoff homer, Edward Julian, hit a home run leading off the game in the first inning for the Twins. Like, I wonder if that affected Miller, changed his game plan or something. But like you said, it was mostly a command thing. And so maybe the command led to that. He didn't put the pitch where he wanted. But yeah, it seemed like the stuff was solid, but he couldn't put it where he wanted. And it's hard to have success like that. And, overall, when you factor in that he, everything that you factor in, it was a tie game, having a chance to get him out of there, not face the top of the order a third time. I didn't mind the decision at all, even in a vacuum. And then when you do factor in the whole 162 or, 173 of it all, it made even more sense. But yeah, it's easy to make a case for leaving him in, but if he stays in and the top of the order gets him for a third time, we would be talking about, why would Roberts leave him in when the top of the order had already had success off of him twice? Why do you let him face it the third time? It's a good example of why every managerial decision is a no-win proposition.
Yeah, and I think with Miller, what we talked about before with him after his great start and kind of why we've been excited about him is all those pitches that he does have. He throws about 5 pitches at least 10% of the time. And it's great when it's working, or even when 3 of them are working, 2 of them are working, but it doesn't matter if you're not putting it where you want it to. And that's kind of what we saw here. And, that to get through the 4 innings with just 2 runs was a win, especially with just 8 base runners in the sense of 5 hits and 3 walks. And, they talked about it on the broadcast, and we were kind of, they've talked about it over the course of time with baseball, that the best pitchers find ways to get through games without their best stuff or without, on not their best day. And I do think that that's something that Bobby is still kind of learning through. We talked about before the big inning. He avoided the big inning in this game. He didn't avoid the big inning last game, and that's the biggest difference, obviously, in terms of how deep he went into the game. So that's a step in the right direction for that. He avoided the big inning. He got through 4 innings, good enough. Now moving forward, you would hope that turns into 5 or 6 innings with not the best stuff and avoiding that big inning. And it's all a progression. We have, we've seen what Miller can do, and we're all excited about it, but we do have to remember it is his second season in the big leagues and first full season.
Yeah. And, I guess that's another argument in favor of taking him out when they did, is you can make a pretty good pretty good case that he flirted with disaster and maybe got a little bit lucky in those first 4 innings. And, so maybe you just say, hey, he only allowed 2 runs. We will take that. Let's hope the bullpen. And the fact is, the bullpen did pitch the last 4 innings and only allowed 1 run. And most of the time, if the Dodgers pitchers have allowed 3 runs in this game, most of the time that's going to be a Dodger win. So even though, it's kind of funny that we're talking about Bobby Miller's struggles when Alex Vesia gets the loss and the offense deserves half the credit for the loss, but it wasn't the dominant game we were hoping for from Bobby Miller, especially bouncing back from that struggle in Chicago.
Yeah. So again, Dodgers win the series. Not the best way to win the series if you've watched this podcast long enough, or our podcast in general, but Dodgers have a day off on Thursday and then they're back home this weekend. So that'll be fun. Jeff, you got anything else?
No, I guess, Michael Grove is maybe a bright spot that we should at least mention. He went 2 1/3 innings. He came in when Vesia, they weren't going to let Vesia face more righties. And so he came in, finished off the 5th inning, pitched 2 more innings, no hits allowed, 4 strikeouts. And so, I guess that's 4 1/3 straight scoreless innings for Michael Grove. So after being terrible, he has been good lately. So maybe he's just out here to spite us and that is going to pitch well. And I'll take that, whatever it is, whatever it takes.
Yeah, we'll see. Obviously, there's different things to talk about. Vesia is probably a point of concern. Chris Taylor, who did pinch hit late in the game, only has 1 hit on the season. The bottom of the order in general, which we've talked about before. There's a lot to get into, but there's no game tomorrow. So we'll have all that to talk about. If you have any questions specifically about those, remember you can send them to us. Let's get into that. Thank you for listening to Locked On Dodgers. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Make sure to check us out every single day and subscribe where we get podcasts on YouTube and get notified when episodes are ready. You can go to YouTube as well for Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, 2 24/7 streaming channels from the Locked On Podcast Network, covering the biggest news, stories, and thoughts from the baseball world, or not the baseball world, from the sports world and the LA sports world. You can also go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers to get text directly from us and be notified of our thoughts, news, things that happen, everything that you can think of. Basically a better version of Twitter, because you're only working with us too. If you want to find us on social media, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vincent91. You can DM us for any questions or comments. You can also send those via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope to be here with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Text Smart Device Pay Podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.